Insight Brilliance, brought to you by H&H.
Welcome to Insight Brilliance, the podcast from H&H, where today we're going to be looking at how you can use meditation to get the vibe back into your organisation. And I'm delighted to be joined by Paps Shaikh from Good Vibration, who's going to tell us all about it.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I'm very excited. Look, I think, not least just because, and I know we're going to kind of open all of this up, but well-being means so much to so many different people. And for me, when I've got on to this journey more recently, more as a practitioner than actually someone who practices it for themselves, one of the key reasons I did it was because I wanted to take this into the world of work, into the world of corporates and all the rest of it. And so when I was invited very kindly by Duncan, who obviously works here, Insight, I was very excited about this. So thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Do you want to tell us a bit about your journey to where you are today? Because you've got an interesting story in terms of what brought you to this point.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. I always like to start. I'm a South Londoner. There's a place called Clapham. Grew up there in a very mixed community. Parents were immigrants over from India who really embraced this island. And as my wife said, she never met anyone more patriotic than my father, actually. But what that gave me was a real sense of grounding and belonging on this wonderful island. But so I kind of grew up in this very mixed environment. I had a big Jamaican community, and with that came huge amounts of reggae music and big sound systems. So I kind of felt this connection with sound and music since I was a child, because I'll tell you the stories. They used to set sound systems up at the end of our road in what is now Balham and Clapham, very posh area now. And on a Sunday, you would have, 10,000 megawatts of sound and reggae just playing on the streets. And I think what I realized there was how music was this catalyst and sound and bringing people together. And I have been just, you could call it an obsession, music. So one of my last kind of full-time roles in the digital space was a company called Nextdoor as well. So this is community-based social media, really, where you only connect with the people around you. And I thought, there's an intersection between tech and doing good as well, because if you're building stronger communities, we completely understand how that can really positively affect everyone's health. So I kind of did 5 years there, launched international monetization. We IPO'd at the end of 2021. I won't go into that. That's a completely another story as well. And then long story short, I hit burnout coming into 2022, and I didn't even really realize it myself. It was my wife, and working for a San Francisco company, which I've done in many instances. You do your day shift here, looking after Europe, and then at 5 o'clock, all your lovely American colleagues wake up and they're bright and breezy, and you're like, okay. So I decided to leave, and then I had been practicing yoga, mindfulness, meditation, a lot of these practices for quite a while. And then I thought to myself, I can take this to the corporate world. There's someone called Deepak Chopra, most of you will be very familiar with. And, he is probably the biggest protagonist in the space of well-being to take these practices from the East and bring them to the West. I'm kind of, dividing the world up in these kind of, geographical sense. But, it was really the Beatles who did this first. When they were awakening, they went and found someone called the Maharishi. And the Maharishi really is a bona fide guru. He took these practices from thousands of years ago. There have been sages and people sat around the Himalayas and other parts of Asia understanding the value of a quiet mind. And I'll come on to that in a bit. And so I learned to become a meditation teacher with Deepak Chopra and his team. It's a full course, really. It's just over a year. And then where I'm at now, I am a wellbeing consultant practitioner in the corporate space. I do it for individuals and groups in North London, where I live as well. And I thoroughly enjoy it. And many people say, what do you get out of it? When I run my sound baths, people just get up and they look at me and they say, oh my God, I feel brilliant. And I think to myself, what more do you want in life? Because if you can bring some of this goodness to people, then then it's a fabulous thing. And then I'll finish up on the last thing. And, we organize parties here. It's called Saturday Social. You can find it on Instagram. All our handles be up there. And again, you know, we're a cohort at my age of people that grew up as a generation that, you know, the festivals, and it's not just about the hedonistic element of partying, it's about the community element. And, the studies that have shown that people who go out and dance and keep themselves active and get rhythmic to sounds, the benefits are, they're just untold. So we put these parties together because people still want to go out and dance in our age range. People in their 40s and 50s, they
We're
say,
still able to. It's a miracle, isn't it?
well, it's not just that. They're saying that actually a lot of the clubs are being kept alive by people in the 40s and 50s because
Yeah.
it's just the way it's worked.
So let's talk a bit about let's kind of zone in on the business and the wellness for corporate clients. Talk to me a bit about that. What sort of things do they come to you looking for?
For most of them, they realize that these well-being practices will bring some relief. Stress is the number one issue we have in our modern world because the whole of modern society has kind of developed in many ways that we just carry a lot of this around. And I think it seems to me, and a lot of people around us as well, doctors have been talking about how it's a silent killer. It's so prevalent now. So within corporates and businesses, probably in the last 10 years, they've worked out actually to ensure our staff are doing well, they're healthy, they're connected, and all the other good things, that we need to provide moments and invest in our people so they get this release. And I'm going to use that word. It's relaxation and release, because in any of the practices I do, so for instance, if I'm doing a sound bath, there's different stages to it. One of the key earlier stages is relaxation, because you want people to calm down. And then you move on to the release section, and that can come through different instruments in that kind of context. But yeah, I think that's what people are looking for. And what I also find is actually individuals within companies. I mean, sometimes I'm on different groups and networks. They'll go to someone in their business and say, I think our team could do with this, or a senior leadership team. And one thing I'll mention in there, I'm partnered with another coach at the moment, and we're very much focusing on senior leadership teams, but really these modules can be applied to anyone in the business. But one of the reasons we do this is because so much of the tone in a business is set by the executive senior management team.
Yeah.
Now, in a world where there's more compassion, more understanding, more connectedness, more balanced approaches to what you're doing, because if you come in, let's face it, whether I've been that boss or there is another boss who's super stressed, it can just set the tone in the office. And I'm talking about more an environment, well, it can happen online as well, where people are together. So that's the kind of calling from the corporate world, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about how things like sound baths provide that release for people?
Meditation is about quietening the mind. We have, on average, an average human has 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day. Most of the thoughts we have are the same ones we had yesterday, or the week before, or the month before, recurring thoughts from, what am I going to have for lunch? I haven't done that. I haven't done this. There may be some anger related issues in there which we haven't dispelled, or just kind of, come to some kind of closure on. But in between every thought, there is a gap. Because one thought is not the next thought. And when we talk about teaching meditation, when you can increase that gap, you find peace. And a lot of people ask me, what happens in that gap? Nothing happens in that gap. You give your brain a complete rest. When you give your brain a complete rest, physiologically, everything else calms down. Your heart rate, your breathing, because everything is linked, right? The mind-body system. And we know that. So by meditating, what you're doing is giving yourself deep rest. And when you meditate for quite a long time, I generally suggest, if you can do it twice a day, once in the morning, ideally early in the morning, before you've looked at your phone, before you've been triggered by the emails, before the outside world. and all the information we're getting, too much information, is just starting to get the wheels in motion. You meditate then, and then ideally in the afternoon or early evening as well. You give yourself an amazing rest, but you're finding these gaps between your thoughts. We are in a state in the world, and I'd say the complete world, because of the digital revolution and the amount of data we have available, the amount of content, the amount of pictures we've got to look at Instagram, the amount of messages we've got on WhatsApp, and the list is going on and on and on. When do you give yourself a rest? It's a question I would ask to anyone listening here. When are you cultivating some time for your own well-being? As a world, we spend huge amounts of resources, money, investment of our own to make our bodies look great. Look at gym memberships. The primary thing at a gym is our physical self. What about our mental well-being? And I think this has become more acute, right? When you look at what's happened over the last few years, through, unfortunately, the COVID period as well, when people suddenly were stopping and weren't running, weren't getting on the bus, weren't going across the Pennines, weren't commuting into London, and we realized actually looking after our mental well-being was really important. So meditation is one of these practices that there are a huge number of benefits, and I'm going to round all the benefits up with all of these practices. But with respect to meditation, if you can find some quiet time where you've got to close your eyes, you've got to close the senses down, and just time for yourself. And at the end, I'm going to provide a couple of little takeaways which you're going to be able to access. And so, just some guided meditations which you'll be able to do with me as well, and that'll be kind of available thereafter. So, I meditate, at least once a day, if not twice a day, because the benefits for me are amazing. And it's not just about what I see, it's what people see around you and how they experience that. Let's go into sound healing. Sound healing is generally an activity where you as a participant, most instances, come and lie down if you can. It's a passive experience, because what happens is someone like myself will then take you on a sound journey using different instruments. I use Tibetan bowls, crystal bowls, which are really en vogue at the moment. I have a symphonic gong, which there's going to be a gong, 5-minute gong sound bath, which you're going to be able to access as well, where I take you. But with all these instruments, I take you into what's called the alpha theta state. So that's between 4 and 12 hertz. Our brain have a natural cycle of waves that go up and down depending on what state it's in. Now, within this 4 to 12 hertz I would liken it to when you're going to bed and you're just about to fall asleep and you get that blissful moment. You're neither here, you're neither there. So your brain is active, but at a very passive level. It's aware, and they think that actually this is what cave people were doing. So they were in this state because they knew if there was something going on and there was some rustling coming up the hillside, but yet they were getting rest. And we lost this for a variety of reasons, because the Industrial Revolution, and we started to farm many, many millennia ago. So when you get into this state, again, like meditation, what happens is that you release stress. You don't know about it. So, when I teach meditation and people go away and meditate, I sometimes say this is a completely new practice for you. Just be careful, because if you're doing this twice a day for a couple of weeks, months as well, you're going to find that you dissipate stress every time you engage in one of these practices. So this happens in sound healing. Typically an hour, people get up, and as I said at the beginning, they say, oh my God, I feel different. And sometimes they can't actually verbalize what that difference is. A lot of instances, people go home and sleep. I'm going to give you some examples because some are fun. Someone went back on, a person who's 50 years old, went back on a holiday, a childhood holiday to Africa. I had an artist, she had a painting, she had 2 paintings. She got up, she said, oh my God, I've just combined these 2 paintings together, and you have a complete wide spectrum of people. See, actually, let me just stop there. People get from these practices what they need. We should innately trust our own selves. Our bodies and our minds actually know what we need. And people say, what's the expectation? I say, don't have too much expectation. Even if you practice meditation every day, don't have too much. You'll get what you need from it. So with sound healing, like meditation, it takes you into deep rest. It's the triggering of this relaxation response with all of these practices. It's the lowest common denominator as well. Now, breathing, which there's many resources available. In the traditional sense, it's called pranayama. I mean, these breathing practices have been around for, again, thousands and thousands of years. When we breathe slowly, so, if I was just to start to slow down my brain, my talking starts to slow down, and I talk quite quickly normally, and actually my brain starts to slow down. So breathing is very, very useful for, let's say, managing anxieties. You could be in a meeting, could be in a boardroom, you could be in a larger meeting, some level of anxiety is kicking in. You could very quietly, even keeping your eyes open should you wish, just start to slow the breathing down. And it's amazing within a couple of seconds you can start to calm the whole nervous system, because again, it's back to this fight or flight response, right? Everything is starting to well up, the heart's starting to pump, the blood's getting to the outs, to your skin on the outside, and you don't really need all of that, and all you want to do is just find a bit of calmness. So breathing is incredibly powerful. Last not least, yoga. Yoga uh, Yoga, in its truest sense, in the Indian subcontinent, was created for one reason. It was created so people could exercise, limber up, and then be able to sit in a meditative state for hours. So that is the primary yoga. So when you talk about the 7 limbs of yoga, and I won't go into all of this, you can find loads more information if you follow me on Instagram, and please do. Um, uh, so yoga was designed to do that. But one of the great things about the yoga is that it's a mind and body connection. Because for those of the people who practice yoga, you have to connect these two elements. And again, going to the gym is great, and we all do it. I know I'm a member as well. But just doing the physical exercise and not connecting to the mind, it doesn't really kind of make sense. So yoga is a great add-on, should I say, even if you are really into looking after yourself physically as well. So 4 key practices, and excuse me, and some of the sessions that we run, sometimes we'll do all of them, or sometimes we'll have a series of where we go in over a period of a couple of months. So sometimes we'll just do yoga, sometimes we'll do breathing and meditation, and sometimes we'll just do sound sound healing as well, which can take an hour or so. Okay, I'm just going to pause there because I've talked a lot. Look, I think these well-being practices can create more harmonious, loving relationships. One of the reasons is because if one is calmer, right, in oneself, then the way we react to situations is calmer. Because, you know, taking a step back, life is about ups and downs. There is a very linear path where we don't have challenges and, even deep upset in our lives. We lose people. We know there is, a life cycle is, it's finite. And, after losing my parents, I went through this process as well. But so how we deal with challenges in life and in the workplace can be, wildly different depending on how we react to it. So if we're calmer, the chances are the relationships we have with our colleagues and at home are just going to be of a higher quality, because it may be your partner's not having a good day and he or she has said something to you, and normally you're going to get triggered for a variety of reasons. Maybe there's other underlying issues, but if you have, if you cultivate kind of equanimity and compassion, it's just going to be easier to deal with all of those. And I think that just creates much better relationships. These practices improve creativity and problem solving because, as I mentioned, um, we, rather than just continuing with these 60 to 80,000 thoughts, which are just whirring around in our mind, and in a lot of instances creating anxiety and stress as well, we kind of move beyond these patterns, and we can sometimes get into a state of what's being called the flow. There's a very famous Czech philosopher. I mean, you can find this. He coined this thing called flow, where we find ourselves in this state where we feel like we're not having to put an effort in, but our mind focuses us on something, and creativity comes out and problem solving comes out in this state of flow. And by actually, more specifically, meditating can really help get you into these states. And this is where time seems to stand still. And instead of kind of struggling and trying to force things to happen, everything you need comes naturally. So you're doing less and you accomplish more as well. I would, for anyone who's interested, just go and type in flow, and you'll see, I can't remember his name and I can't pronounce it either, but he was a genius who understood what this was. But so mindfulness and meditation can help you do that as well. Look, these practices decrease depression, anxiety, and insomnia as well. This deep state of rest produced triggers the brain to release neurotransmitters, including dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. And each of these kind of chemicals occur naturally within our brain, and each is linked to different aspects of happiness. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through this, but you can find all of this information. There is a wealth of resource as well. So these practices kind of choreograph with the release of these neurotransmitters, but what it does is, there is it kind of activates different parts of our brain as well. And I think there's something called the prefrontal cortex, which is referred to as the CEO of the brain, because there's a lot of functioning, and a lot of processing that goes through. Another part called the amygdala as well. When they have done brain scans on people who have been meditating for decades, they found that these parts of the brain have actually grown. So it's only recently that really neuroscientists have found something called plasticity. And even as you grow older, you can make new connections in the brain. So what they used to think was that as you got to whatever age, I'm just going to pick 45, that you couldn't really grow the brain, but physically you can grow the brain. And meditation and these practices have been shown to increase neuroplasticity. So whatever age you are, it doesn't matter whether you're 12 or whether you're 72, you can continue to grow these parts. And there's a lot to do with creativity coming out of there as well. And I'm going to talk about happiness. Happiness is
Wonderful. I love talking about happiness. Go on, go for it.
There is this book, this gentleman called Matthew. Let me just get in front of the camera. And I'll put this in the notes as well. This individual is considered to be the happiest person in the world. He's got a PhD, he's French, he worked in the Pasteur Institute, some of huge institute, scientific. He left and then has meditated with the Dalai Lama. He spends a huge amount of time in the Himalayas, unsurprisingly, because that place is magical, the energy. But he talks a lot about what does happiness mean. Some of the basic things around happiness is, I think, self-awareness. Who are we? As I just said, taking some time to understand who we are, what we feel, what we might need. Relationships and connection are vitally important, right? We as humans are biologically, we thrive in communities because we support each other. Loneliness is on the rise. While I was working at Nextdoor, one of the things we were trying to combat were elderly people across the UK who are spending the vast majority of their lives on their own. And when you're not connected to other human beings, you can't feel happiness. And look, this is no slight. I'm using our country, our nation here, because this is where we live, right? This is prevalent everywhere. Nextdoor was actually an American business, and loneliness was even more acute over there as well. Connectedness, these kind of, I think this benevolence and giving back is also a cornerstone of happiness. The transaction, when you give something and you're not expecting something back, makes us feel happy. You can go and read as much as you possibly want about this. A small, kind gesture, these random acts of kindness, which appeared, that kind of acronym, maybe 10 years ago, just smiling at someone. And if they smile back at you, I mean, far be it from me to suggest this to anyone. We all know this. Just a small little smile you know, 9 times out of 10, people will smile at you. You'll probably make their day. And people talk about, oh, someone smiled at me walking down. I live in London where, we kind of joke, we have lots of northern friends come down and go, no one smiles on the tube. When you've got millions of people, you end up being in this default position. If you smile at everyone, I don't know, maybe sometimes people would think you're weird, but I do smile at people. I'm not sitting in any higher, I'm not plumping up my moral cushions here. It's just it's a nice thing though, isn't it? Because we as humans, we react together. So I talked about happiness because all of these other practices, releasing stress, being kinder and compassionate too. Let's talk about the work context. Being kinder and compassionate and more understanding about what the other person is going through. That email that comes through and it triggers you. You're like, oh my God, that person, why have they sent that to me? Maybe you just take a minute. Maybe you're calmer. Maybe you understand, God, they are under a lot of pressure at the moment. I'm not going to react normally. I might just take a couple of breaths and let's see if I can get a slightly different perspective on it. The workplace can become very toxic, and I don't think it's by design. I am a true believer in human beings are wonderful creatures, and we we are living our lives on a day-to-day basis because we want to do things, we want to be involved. We may find this purpose at work, which I think is another element of happiness at work, but we can be very stressed. Sometimes, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, God, the kind of vibe at work is not good. Maybe have a little look around and think what might be causing it. Maybe actually the senior team is under a huge amount of pressure. And I'm not saying it's okay for them to act in that manner, but maybe that's the reason. Sometimes we have to find the root causes and, they're stressed. How could you help them? Maybe you could help them by cultivating your own peace and calm, because every time your peace and calm and your reaction to something is more kind of balanced, the waves and that interaction is sending kind of goodness out and is only going to end, kind of create a more positive chain reaction, if you see what I mean. So this concept of happiness, and specifically at work, I don't think people talk about it enough, but it's getting a lot better because, we at work talk about purpose, which I don't think was really done. In my first big job in the 90s, there wasn't much chat about values and purpose. So I think at least organizations understand that we need to connect to something. We need to bring people together around something. And, all of this has been done. But you as an individual, if you're struggling at work, one should think about what these values are and what the purpose is, and are you connected with it? And if you're not, raise your hands and discuss it. And I don't think it's a negative thing if you want to discuss these things, because there may be other people in the room or in your organization who need to do that as well. So I'm covering a lot of topics here, but if one can put one's hand on one heart and say that overall I'm happy. Happiness also, remember, is not joy. We have moments of joy. We can go out and have a great meal, and that's joy. And these moments of joy add to it. But happiness is something you cultivate and is more kind of solid through your life. And these, as I mentioned, come through these connections. Some come through benevolence, come through releasing stress. So you're in that state of mind where you're more compassionate. This connection to people at work, living a productive life where you feel you can be creative in your output is natural. Finding these moments of flow at work as well are wonderful as well. Again, I've talked a lot. I feel very
You're
passionate about this
absolutely
stuff.
talking to the converted here. I mean, at H&H, our passion is all about
Yeah,
connectedness, that sense of purpose, alignment with values, making the workplace somewhere where you are happy and productive. And sadly, in the UK, the stats show us that we're probably one of the lowest right now.
24th in the World Happiness Report we are at the moment this
Yeah.
year.
So, we absolutely need to do everything we can to make it a happier place for people. So, it's been wonderful to hear about your thoughts and your perspectives and the ways in which you are helping people get into that flow. So thank you so much, Paps, for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
So if everything you've shared today has lit a spark in people's minds, where can they go to find out more?
So I've got an Instagram, which is the.goodvibration, where I share lots of information. And just also on that note, if you come and if you can follow me so we can have a nice little value exchange here, if you DM me and just put insight in there, I'm going to create some content, as I mentioned during the podcast. So probably record some lovely sound instruments, short 5-minute sound instruments, and then I'm going to share some breathing techniques with you as well, and you can have that content free of charge. And then I've got my website, which is just good-vibration.net, where you can find lots more information. And should you want me to come into your workplace and deliver some goodness, it would be my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And we'll include all of those links at the bottom of this podcast if you want to find out more.
Great.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Insight Brilliance. If you'd like to keep up to date and have the latest version dropped into your inbox, please like and follow using the links below. And if you'd like to experience the sound bath that Paps has been talking about, stay here and it will follow straight afterwards. Thank you for listening.
Insight Brilliance, brought to you by H&H.
Hi everyone. So you are about to listen to what I would describe as a deep ocean gong bath. It's going to last roughly 5 minutes. So one of the most important things is please put some headphones on. Don't listen to this on your laptop or on your phone, because you won't feel the deep resonant sounds. You can put it onto a hi-fi or just keep it on your headphones and enjoy as I take you into the deep ocean. Thank you.